In August 12, 2024, the ballroom was drenched in golden light, chandeliers sparkling like stars above the elite of the sports world. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and cameras flashed as NFL royalty mingled with Hollywood's finest. But amid the glamour and celebration, a chilling silence fell. In the corner near the grand staircase, a body lay sprawled on the marble floor. Blood pooled beneath the lifeless form, staining the pristine white tiles a haunting shade of red. The glass of champagne, still half full, had slipped from his hand, shattered into 1,000 pieces beside him. It was Derek Thompson, the star, wide receiver for the NFC's Los Angeles Hawks. He was the man of the hour, celebrating his team's victory, but now his eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the crystal chandeliers above, his face frozen in an expression of shock and betrayal. Amelia Thompson, his beautiful wife, stood just a few feet away, her hands trembling, eyes fixed on her husband's body. Her emerald green dress sparkled under the lights, but her face was pale, her lips parted in silent horror. But what no one knew, what no one could have imagined, was that Amelia's shock wasn't from grief. It was from satisfaction. She had planned this, every detail, every step, and no one would ever suspect her. Not after the way she had played the perfect wife, the loving, loyal partner, who had just discovered her husband dead in the middle of the grandest party of the year. But the question lingered in the air, cold and heavy. Was this a tragic accident? Or was it the perfect revenge? 6 months earlier, the Derek Thompson was living the American dream, star wide receiver for the Los Angeles Hawks, a multi-million-dollar mansion overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and a wife who was the envy of every woman in the city. With his chiseled jawline, dazzling smile, and effortless charm, Derek was adored by fans and worshipped by the media. But behind the flashing cameras and public adoration, his life was a carefully crafted illusion. His marriage to Amelia Thompson was picture-perfect, or so it seemed. Amelia was the quintessential NFL wife. Stunningly beautiful, with flawless golden hair, she was elegance personified. Her every move was graceful, her laughter melodic, and her loyalty unwavering. She was Derek's rock, the woman who stood by his side through every victory and defeat. But what no one knew was that beneath her poised exterior, Amelia was deeply lonely. She had sacrificed her own dreams, abandoned her career in fashion design, and devoted herself entirely to Derek. Everything she did was for him. Every social gathering, every charity event, every interview, she played her part to perfection. She was his trophy wife, his accessory, his status symbol. But in his eyes, she was nothing more than that. Derek's world revolved around football. His life was a cycle of training, games, and endorsements. He was obsessed with his image, his legacy, and his next big contract. And in this relentless pursuit of fame and success, Amelia had become invisible to him. Their conversations were reduced to shallow pleasantries. Their marriage was devoid of passion, affection, or intimacy. But Derek's lack of interest in his wife wasn't due to exhaustion or stress. It was because his heart and his desires belonged elsewhere. Enter Vanessa Morgan. Vanessa was the wife of Aaron Morgan, Derek's teammate and closest friend on the team. A former supermodel with caramel skin and hypnotic brown eyes, Vanessa was the embodiment of temptation. She was charismatic, daring, and intoxicatingly beautiful. With her magnetic personality and flirtatious charm, she had men falling at her feet wherever she went. It started innocently enough, a playful exchange at a charity gala, lingering glances during post-game parties, and harmless texts that soon evolved into late-night conversations. But the line between friendship and desire was thin, and Derek crossed it without hesitation. Their affair was explosive, a whirlwind of forbidden passion and reckless abandon. They met in secret, in hotels far from prying eyes, hiding behind closed doors while the world saw them as loyal spouses. But secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of revealing themselves. Amelia wasn't naive. She knew her husband better than anyone. She recognized the subtle changes, his late-night phone calls, the sudden business meetings, the smell of an unfamiliar perfume on his shirts. She noticed the way he looked at Vanessa, the way they laughed a little too easily, stood a little too close. The signs were there and they were glaring, but Amelia played her part flawlessly. She smiled, laughed, and acted oblivious. She didn't confront Derek. She didn't ask questions. She just watched, observed, and waited. She had no proof, but she didn't need it. Her instincts were enough. Her suspicions were confirmed one evening when she returned home unexpectedly. She found Derek in his study, whispering into his phone with a tenderness he never showed her. He didn't hear her enter. He didn't see her standing in the shadows, frozen, as she heard him say the words that shattered her heart. "I love you, Vanessa. I can't wait to see you again." In that moment, everything changed. Amelia's world crumbled around her. She felt a cold wave of betrayal, anger, and humiliation. But she didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't confront him. She simply turned around, walked out, and closed the door behind her. Quietly, calmly, without a sound. Because while Derek was busy chasing his desires, and Vanessa was playing, the temptress Amelia was planning her revenge. She wouldn't let this betrayal break her. She wouldn't be the victim. She had spent years perfecting her role as the perfect wife, the loyal partner, the woman who did everything for her husband. And now, she would use that role to destroy him. No one would ever suspect her. Not Amelia, the loving, devoted wife who had sacrificed everything for her husband. Not Amelia, the graceful, charming socialite who always smiled and never showed a hint of jealousy or anger. But behind that smile, behind those emerald green eyes, a storm was brewing, a storm that would leave Derek and Vanessa shattered, broken, and utterly destroyed, because Amelia had nothing left to lose, and revenge was the only thing keeping her alive. 3 months later in Beverly Hills charity gala, the evening was perfect. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom, casting a golden glow over the sea of glamorous guests. The air was filled with laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the sweet melody of the live jazz band. It was the charity event of the year, hosted by the Los Angeles Hawks, attended by the city's elite celebrities and influential figures. Amelia stood by Derek's side, her emerald green dress shimmering under the lights, her smile radiant, her demeanor poised. She was the perfect wife, gracious, supportive, and proud of her husband. But behind that flawless facade, her heart was ice cold, her mind racing with anticipation. Tonight was the night. Tonight, she would expose them both. She had been planning this for weeks, every detail meticulously arranged. She knew they would be here. Derek as the team's star player, and Vanessa as the charming, attention-seeking wife of his best friend Aaron. They wouldn't be able to resist the spotlight, the flashing cameras, the glamour of the evening, and they were right on cue. Amelia's eyes followed Vanessa as she glided across the room, her caramel skin glowing, her red satin dress hugging her curves perfectly. She was magnetic, her laughter echoing through the room as she flirted shamelessly with Derek. He couldn't take his eyes off her, his gaze lingering on her with a hunger that was impossible to hide. Amelia felt a familiar pang of anger, but she quickly buried it beneath her calm exterior. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. She couldn't let her emotions ruin her plan. She couldn't give herself away. Taking a deep breath, she walked up to the stage, heels clicking against the marble floor. She flashed a charming smile at the event coordinator, effortlessly convincing him to let her make an announcement. She was, after all, the beloved wife of the star of the evening. No one would deny her. As she took the microphone, the room fell. Silent, all eyes on her. She looked stunning under the spotlight, her green eyes sparkling as she addressed the audience. "I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for being here tonight," Amelia began, her voice warm and sincere. "This event means so much to Derek and me, and we're grateful for all your support. But I have one more thing to share, something very special." She pressed a button on the remote in her hand, and the large projector screen behind her flickered to life. A video began to play. It was footage from a hidden camera. Grainy, slightly distorted, but unmistakable. Derek and Vanessa, locked in a passionate embrace in a hotel room, their faces clearly visible, their voices echoing through the ballroom as they whispered words of love and desire. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the room as the guests watched the scandalous scene unfold before their eyes. Derek's face turned ashen, his eyes wide with horror as he watched himself on the screen, exposed for the world to see. Vanessa's face flushed with embarrassment, her hands trembling as she tried to hide behind her husband, Aaron, who looked stunned, his mouth agape in disbelief. Amelia stood there, her face calm, her smile unwavering as she watched the chaos unfold. She felt a cold satisfaction as she saw Derek's reputation crumble, Vanessa's allure shatter, and Aaron's trust disintegrate. But this was just the beginning. Amelia had planned this perfectly. She had planted the hidden camera herself, chosen the footage meticulously, and timed the reveal flawlessly. She wanted them to suffer publicly, to feel the humiliation she had felt, to experience the betrayal that had shattered her heart. But this public exposure wasn't enough. No. Amelia wanted more. She wanted them to pay. She wanted them to feel pain, the kind of pain that would haunt them forever, and she knew exactly how to make that happen. Because tonight, Derek and Vanessa weren't just losing their reputations. They were losing their lives. The ballroom was in chaos. Gasps, whispers, and shocked murmurs filled the air as the scandalous video continued to play on the massive projector screen. Guests stared in disbelief, their eyes wide with shock, their faces contorted with a mix of curiosity and pity. Derek stood frozen, his face drained of color, his body rigid as the images of his betrayal played out before him. He could feel every gaze piercing through him, judging him, condemning him. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing as the walls closed in around him. Beside him, Vanessa's face was pale, her body trembling as she clung to Aaron, desperately trying to shield herself from the looks of contempt and disgust. But Aaron's eyes were fixed on the screen, his face twisted in anguish as he watched his wife in the arms of his best friend. The room was closing in, the air growing suffocating. Derek could feel his career slipping away, his reputation crumbling, his perfect image shattered beyond repair. He looked at Amelia, standing on the stage, her face serene, her eyes cold and emotionless, as she watched the fallout of her perfectly executed plan. He had never seen her like this, so composed, so calculating, so deadly. Without another word, Derek turned and stormed out of the ballroom, his fists clenched, his jaw tight, his mind consumed with rage and humiliation. Vanessa followed him, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she hurried after him, her voice shaking with panic. "Derek, wait, we need to talk," Vanessa called out, her voice desperate. Derek didn't stop, he didn't look back, he didn't say a word. He just kept walking, his body tense, his emotions boiling over as he made his way to the parking lot. He needed to get away, to escape the judgmental eyes, the whispers, the humiliation. He needed to breathe. He reached his car, his hands trembling as he fumbled with his keys. But before he could open the door, Vanessa grabbed his arm, forcing him to turn and face her. What the hell was that? Vanessa's voice was laced with anger and fear. How did she find out? How did she get that video? Derek shook his head, his eyes blazing with fury. I don't know how she did it, but she's ruined me, she's ruined us, everything is over. My career, my reputation, it's all gone. Vanessa's face contorted with panic. We can fix this, we just need to explain. Explain what? Derek snapped, his voice cold and bitter. That we were lying to everyone, that we're cheating behind their backs. There's no fixing this, Vanessa, it's over. Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes, her body shaking with fear. I can't lose Aaron. He'll never forgive me. He'll take the kids. My life will be ruined. Derek's eyes softened for a moment, his anger replaced with pity. But before he could speak, a voice interrupted them. Well, isn't this touching? They both turned to see Amelia standing a few feet away, her arms crossed, her posture relaxed, her eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. She looked beautiful, serene, almost angelic. But her expression was terrifying. Derek's body tensed, his fists clenching at his sides. Amelia, You what? Amelia's voice was calm, steady, dangerously composed. You're sorry. You didn't mean to. You were going to tell me. She laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. Save it, Derek. I already know everything I've known for months. Derek's face paled. How? Amelia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. Did you really think you were that clever? That I wouldn't notice the late nights, the secret phone calls, the lies? She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I knew everything. And I waited, I watched. And tonight, I exposed you both for the liars you are. Vanessa's face turned red, her anger boiling over. You psycho, how could you do this? You humiliated us in front of everyone. Amelia's eyes flicked to Vanessa, her gaze icy. You humiliated yourself when you decided to sleep with my husband. You thought you could steal him away from me. You thought you could play the seductive little temptress and get away with it. She smiled, a cruel, mocking smile. You were wrong. Derek's jaw tightened, his anger rising. All right. You made your point. You got your revenge. But this is cruel, Amelia. Amelia's eyes darkened, her voice low and cold. Cruel? You think this is cruel? She took another step closer, her face inches from his. You haven't seen cruel yet, Derek. This was just the beginning. Before Derek could respond, Amelia's eyes shifted to Vanessa. Her expression changed, a glimmer of pity flashing across her face. I actually feel sorry for you, Vanessa. You were just a pawn in his game. He never loved you. You were just a distraction, a toy. Vanessa's face crumpled, her body trembling with shame and anger. She turned to Derek, her eyes blazing with fury. Is that true? Was I just a game to you? Derek opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Amelia's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. Because by tomorrow morning, neither of you will be alive to explain anything. Derek's eyes widened, his body stiffening as the realization dawned on him. Amelia, what did you do? Amelia's smile widened, a chilling, sinister smile that sent a shiver down his spine. I did exactly what you taught me to do, Derek. I played the game and I won. Before either of them could react, Amelia turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement as she disappeared into the night, leaving them standing there, frozen in fear and disbelief. And as the cold wind swept through the parking lot, carrying the echoes of the evening's scandal, Derek and Vanessa realized that this was far from over. This was just the beginning of the end. Detective Michael Lawson leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his desk as he reviewed the case files. The photos of Derek Thompson and Vanessa Morgan lay before him, their faces frozen in fear and shock, captured in the moments before their tragic deaths. Two bodies found within hours of each other. Derek in his garage, his car filled with exhaust fumes, and Vanessa in her bedroom, an empty bottle of pills by her side. At first glance, they seemed like open and shut cases. A double suicide, driven by guilt, shame, and the public humiliation they had faced at the charity gala. But something didn't sit right with Detective Lawson. Something about the timing, the circumstances, the perfectly orchestrated sequence of events felt too convenient. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the crime scene photos. Derek's body was slumped over the steering wheel, his face pale, his eyes closed. The garage door was closed, the engine still running when they found him. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. A suicide note lay on the passenger seat, scribbled hastily in Derek's handwriting. "I can't live with the shame. I've ruined everything. Forgive me." But Detective Lawson noticed the details. Others had overlooked. The windows were rolled up, the air conditioning was on, and the radio was playing at full volume. It was too neat, too staged. If Derek had intended to end his life, why would he care about comfort? Why would he turn on the AC and listen to music? And then there was Vanessa. She was found lying peacefully on her bed, her face serene, her makeup flawless. The empty bottle of sleeping pills sat neatly on her nightstand, the cap closed, no pills scattered on the floor. Her phone was on silent, and her last message was a single text to Derek. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." It seemed convincing. A grieving mistress devastated by her lover's suicide, taking her own life out of guilt. But there were no fingerprints on the pill bottle, no smudges on the glass of water by her bed. Everything was too clean, too perfect, too orchestrated. Detective Lawson's instincts screamed foul play. And the only person who stood to gain from their deaths was the one who had exposed their affair in the first place, Amelia Thompson. He closed the file, his jaw tightening as he grabbed his coat and headed out of his office. He needed answers, and he was going to get them. Amelia sat by the window, sipping her tea as she watched the sun set over the ocean, its golden hues reflecting off the water. She looked calm, peaceful, almost angelic as the soft breeze played with her golden hair. But behind her serene expression, her mind was racing, calculating, planning. She had played her part perfectly. The grieving widow, devastated by her husband's infidelity, humiliated by his public betrayal, crushed by his tragic suicide. She had cried the right amount of tears, delivered the perfect eulogy, and accepted the condolences with grace and dignity. No one suspected her. No one even considered the possibility, because Amelia was smart. She knew how to play the victim, how to manipulate emotions, how to control the narrative. She had learned from the best. Derek. She had learned how to lie, how to cheat, how to deceive. Her plan had been flawless. She had orchestrated every detail, from the public exposure to the perfectly staged suicides. She knew Derek better than he knew himself. She knew his weaknesses, his fears, his insecurities. She knew how to break him, and she did. But she wasn't prepared for the knock at her door. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she heard the heavy, deliberate knock echo through the mansion. She set down her cup, her fingers tightening as she took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. She knew this moment would come. She was ready for it. She opened the door to find Detective Lawson standing on her porch, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold and calculating. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice firm, "I'm Detective Michael Lawson. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your husband's death." Amelia's face softened, her eyes filling with tears as she forced herself to look vulnerable, broken, devastated. "Of course, Detective. Can I please come in?" She led him to the living room, her posture perfect, her demeanor calm, her movements graceful. She sat down, her hands trembling as she reached for a tissue, dabbing her eyes delicately. "This has been so difficult," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I still can't believe he's gone." Detective Lawson watched her carefully, his eyes never leaving her face. "I understand, Mrs. Thompson. I'm very sorry for your loss, but I have a few questions about the night of the gala." Amelia's heart raced, but she maintained her composure, her expression perfectly controlled. "Of course. Anything to help." Lawson leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Can you tell me where you went after the video played?" "Witnesses say they saw you leave the ballroom shortly after Derek and Vanessa." Amelia hesitated, her mind racing as she carefully crafted her response. I was devastated, humiliated. I couldn't breathe. I went outside to the garden. I needed some air." Lawson's eyes flickered with suspicion, but his voice remained neutral. "Did anyone see you? Speak to you?" Amelia shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, I was alone. I just needed to be alone." Lawson's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening. "I see. And when did you return home?" Amelia looked away, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't remember. Everything's a blur. I was in shock. I just drove around trying to clear my head." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading, her voice breaking. Are you saying you think I had something to do with Derek's death?" Lawson leaned back, his eyes cold, his expression unreadable. "I'm just doing my job, Mrs. Thompson, but I'll be in touch." He stood up, his posture rigid, his face serious as he headed for the door. But before he left, he turned back, his eyes locking with hers. "One more thing. The video. How did you get it?" Amelia's heart stopped, her breath catching in, her throat, but she quickly recovered, her voice steady, her expression calm. "An anonymous envelope, no return address. I didn't know who sent it, but when I saw it, I just wanted the truth to come out." Lawson nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Interesting. Well, thank you for your time, Mrs. Thompson." He walked out, closing the door behind him, his footsteps echoing down the driveway. Amelia stood there, her body tense, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She knew she had fooled him. But she also knew he wasn't done with her yet, and the game was far from over. Detective Michael Lawson sat in his office, staring at the board filled with photos, timelines, and evidence linked to the deaths of Derek Thompson and Vanessa Morgan. He had replayed every detail, analyzed every piece of evidence, and interviewed every witness. Yet nothing concrete pointed to foul play, nothing except his instincts. And the unsettling feeling that Amelia Thompson was hiding something. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at his door. His partner, Detective Lisa Monroe, entered, her face serious, her eyes sharp. She placed a file on his desk, her voice steady. "You need to see this." Lawson opened the file, his eyes widening as he read the report. The toxicology results for Derek and Vanessa were identical. Both had traces of a rare, undetectable poison that induced heart failure. It mimicked a natural death, leaving no evidence of foul play. It was the perfect murder weapon, and only someone with advanced medical knowledge could have used it. Lawson's heart raced as he connected the dots. Amelia's father had been a renowned cardiologist before his passing. She would have had access to his research, his books, his notes. She would have known exactly how to administer the poison without leaving a trace, and she had the perfect motive, but he needed proof. He needed something to link her to the crime, something concrete. His phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. It was a call from Aaron Morgan, Vanessa's husband. "Detective Lawson, I think I found something. I was going through Vanessa's things, her phone, and I found a video." Lawson's pulse quickened. "What kind of video?" "It's from the night of the gala. Vanessa was recording a selfie video, and she accidentally caught something in the background. Something I think you need to see." Amelia stood by her bedroom window, watching the ocean waves crash against the rocks below. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the horizon. It was beautiful, peaceful, perfect. She felt a sense of accomplishment, a cold satisfaction that radiated through her body. She had done it. She had destroyed Derek and Vanessa, exposed their betrayal, and eliminated them without a trace of suspicion. It was poetic justice. They had betrayed her, humiliated her, shattered her heart. But she hadn't broken. She had fought back and she had won. She turned away from the window, her face serene, her eyes gleaming with victory. But her satisfaction was short-lived. There was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Detective Lawson standing on her porch, his expression serious, his eyes cold and calculating. "Detective Lawson," she said, feigning surprise. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" Lawson's jaw tightened, his eyes never leaving hers. "We need to talk, Mrs. Thompson." "May I come in?" Amelia hesitated, her heart pounding, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Of course, please come in." She led him to the living room, her movements graceful, her demeanor poised. She sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face a picture of innocence. Lawson remained standing, his posture rigid, his eyes cold. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "I received a video today from Vanessa Morgan's phone." Amelia's heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat. But she kept her expression neutral, her voice calm. Video?" Lawson turned the phone towards her, his eyes locked on her face as he pressed play. The screen showed Vanessa smiling into the camera as she recorded a selfie video, her laughter echoing through the room. But in the background, just over her shoulder, Amelia could be seen standing near the punch bowl, holding a small vial, pouring its contents into 2 glasses of champagne, the very same glasses that Derek and Vanessa had drunk from that night. Amelia's face turned pale, her body freezing as she stared at the screen, her hands trembling. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Lawson's voice was cold, his eyes hard. "You poisoned them. You staged their suicides. You thought you covered your tracks. But you didn't see Vanessa recording you in the background. You were so focused on your revenge, you missed the one detail that would expose you." Amelia's eyes widened, her body shaking as the realization sank in. She had been so meticulous, so careful. But she had overlooked a single fatal detail. She looked up at Lawson, her eyes filled with panic, her voice trembling. You don't understand. They deserved it. Lawson's jaw tightened, his voice cold and firm. "Save it, Amelia. It's over. You're under arrest for the murders of Derek Thompson and Vanessa Morgan." He pulled out his handcuffs, his face expressionless as he locked them around her wrists. Amelia's body went limp, her face crumpling as she realized her perfect revenge had just fallen apart. As Lawson led her out of the mansion, the sun continued to set, casting long shadows across the driveway. The air was cold, the wind biting as Amelia's heels clicked against the pavement. Her head hung low, her shoulders slumped. Her plan had been perfect, her execution flawless. But in the end, she had been defeated by the very thing she thought she controlled, her own revenge, because no matter how carefully she had planned it, she couldn't change one simple truth: revenge always comes with a price. And Amelia Thompson had just paid hers.